The German government claims there are just over 250,000 homeless people across Germany.
You've been told Germany is how society should work. That's the lie. From the outside, it looks like stability. Clean streets, strong rules, efficient offices, and systems that never seem to sleep. But step inside and you find something different. This isn't chaos. It's control that forgot about people. A place where one delay becomes a warning, one warning becomes a penalty, and one mistake becomes a countdown. So who designed a system this unforgiving? Why does one missed step now cost everything? And how did functioning becomes something you can fail? The rent trap you don't see. The first warning is a letter that looks routine. It arrives in a plain envelope, it uses polite language, and it tells you that the additional payment is due. If you have never lived near the edge, you read that as administration. If you are already balancing groceries against transport, you read it as a countdown. The trap is not just the price. The trap is uncertainty after you sign. A listing shows a base rent, but your monthly reality can swing with building charges, heating, and adjustments that arrive later. The numbers in the advertisement can be cold. The numbers in your life become warm, and warm can jump. You see it on the page, a neat table of costs, then a line that says you used more, then a total that does not care about your paycheck schedule. Sometimes it is heating, sometimes it is hot water, sometimes it is building services that you never notice until the bill arrives. You can do everything right for months and still get hit with a demand that rewrites your budget in one page. Then comes the quiet math at the kitchen table. You do not ask, "Can I pay?" You ask, "What do I not pay?" You pay part of it and hope it buys time. You move money from groceries to utilities, then from utilities back to rent. You promise yourself it is only for this month, but the letters do not care about promises. They care about dates. One surprise payment pushes you behind. One late month triggers reminders. Reminders become fees. Fees become conflict. And once the relationship breaks, the system does not ask if the bill was reasonable or if your job contract is fragile. It asks one question: did you pay? So you start making defensive choices. You delay a medical visit because the co-payment is now rent money. You skip social life because the ticket is now heating money. You stretch food because the electricity is now rent money. From the outside, you still look housed. Inside, you are already practicing homelessness. Once the numbers stop working, you discover that leaving is not escape, it's competition. The housing lottery. The search does not feel like a search. It feels like applying to a gatekeeper machine that rewards stability and punishes anyone who has recently lost it. You see it in the viewing queue. People stand in stairwells holding folders like job applicants. Nobody says it out loud, but everyone knows the scoring: clean documents, predictable income, clean credit history, fast deposit, calm presentation. One missing sheet can end the conversation before it begins. There is a standard bundle many applicants carry: a self-disclosure form, recent pay slips, a copy of an identity document, proof of employment, and a credit report. In Germany, landlords often ask for a report from Schutzgemeinschaft for Allgemeine Kreditsicherung, the private credit bureau most people treat as a gate. If your record is clean, you walk through. If it has a mark, even a temporary one, your application turns cold. Scarcity turns caution into policy. When there are many applicants for one room, the safest choice is the most normal-looking choice. That is how a market produces homelessness without anyone needing to intend it. And the loop starts quickly. If you are couch surfing, you do not control sleep. If you do not control sleep, you do not perform well at work. If work slips, income slips. If income slips, applications weaken. And when applications weaken, your options shrink. This is why some people choose hidden arrangements over another round of rejection. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is predictable. And then you learn that without a fixed place, even the system that's supposed to help can no longer find you. If you care about understanding how this really works, subscribe now and follow along as we map the rest of this system step by step. The address problem that breaks everything. A lot of systems assume you have a fixed place to be found. They say submit it by post. They say bring proof of residence. They say we need a registered address. These are normal demands. That is what makes them dangerous. Without a stable place, you become invisible in the wrong way. You are visible visible to the street and to complaints, but invisible to the parts of society that deliver stability, benefits, banking, official letters, and medical paperwork that decides your deadlines. People improvise. They borrow addresses. They use a friend's mailbox. They ask a coworker to accept letters care of. They stay longer than welcome because a form is due. Every relationship becomes logistics, and the shame grows because outsiders think the fix is simple. Just register, just update, just call. But calling does not fix a system that runs on documents and appointments. Miss the window and the consequences arrive later, when you already have fewer options. A missed letter can mean a missed meeting. A missed meeting can mean delayed support. Delayed support can mean unpaid rent. Then eviction pressure begins, and it does not feel like drama. It feels like a series of polite steps that end in you losing the key. Being visible is not enough when progress only happens inside a calendar you cannot control. The appointment wall. You refresh a website at night and the slots are gone again. You look at the earliest appointment and it is weeks away. Your deadline is days away. The person behind the counter stays polite, but the message is the same. Without an appointment, you cannot move forward. This is organized scarcity. Scheduling works when your life is stable. It fails when your life is breaking. When people fall toward homelessness, they need speed. A document corrected, a benefit processed, a registration fixed, a mistake reversed before it becomes a penalty. The appointment wall turns urgent problems into waiting problems, and waiting problems become consequences. It can be as small as a fee. It can be as large as losing a benefit month. It can be as quiet as a letter you never received because you had to move again. The rules look neutral because everyone faces the same website. Neutrality disappears when one person can take a day off work and another cannot. When one person has a printer and another is photographing pages on a phone. When one person reads the letter quickly and another translates it line by line at midnight. As soon as you fall behind, one object starts multiplying, the letter pile, and each letter is a task. That is how paperwork becomes a second job. Paperwork as a second job. There is a moment when the folder becomes heavier than your backpack. Not in weight, in consequences. Each sheet represents time you do not have, a request for proof, a reminder, a notice that your case is paused until you submit something you cannot easily get. Paperwork is supposed to verify reality. In practice, it filters people by routine, storage, language confidence, and mental energy. Homelessness destroys all four. If you are moving between temporary places, you lose documents. If you lose documents, you cannot prove things. If you cannot prove things, the system delays support, and while it delays, rent and debt keep moving. The clock does not stop because your folder is incomplete. You also start noticing how paperwork multiplies itself. One missing document triggers a new request. That request creates a new appointment. The appointment creates a new waiting period, then a new deadline. It is not one form. It is a chain of forms that assumes your life is stationary. This creates a new behavior, avoidance. People skip appointments because they cannot miss work. They delay opening letters because it feels like opening a threat. Then the system reads that as non-cooperation. Non-cooperation becomes the reason to cut support, so you can have many programs and still grow street sleeping. The issue is not only whether help exists. The issue is whether a human being in crisis can complete the steps while exhausted, and when exhaustion hits, work stops acting like a firewall. It becomes another trapdoor. Work exists, stability doesn't. A person can be employed and still be one surprise away from homelessness. You see it in how people talk about their month. Shifting hours, probation periods, short contracts, constant calculation. The work can be normal. The instability is the problem. When your housing is fragile, a small work disruption becomes a major housing disruption. A late train becomes a warning. A warning becomes fewer shifts. Fewer shifts become arrears. Arrears becomes panic. Some jobs are also structured to keep you replaceable. Temporary agency work, short renewals. We will see next month. It is not always malicious. It is risk management by employers, but the risk gets pushed onto the worker, and the worker's housing absorbs the shock. Homelessness then feeds back into performance. Sleep fragments. Hygiene gets complicated. Storing documents and work items becomes hard. Charging a phone becomes hard. Being calm becomes hard. None of this appears on a resume. It appears in a supervisor's patience. That's when people turn to the safety safety net and discover it runs on a very different clock. The benefit maze on the worst week of your life. A safety net is not only money, it is timing, support that arrives after. An eviction notice is not prevention. Applying can mean multiple appointments, multiple forms, and multiple proofs. It can mean being told to return with an updated document you cannot get quickly. It can mean waiting for processing while the rent clock keeps ticking. It also means being judged by compliance. While you are in crisis, respond quickly to letters. Attend meetings on weekdays. Prove you are searching for work. Keep every receipt. Keep every record. Those rules make sense when you are stable. In an unstable life, they become failure triggers. Even when money arrives, it may not match the pace of your bills. Rent comes monthly. Providers come with deadlines. The safety net moves on administrative time. That gap is where a lot of people fall, so some people disengage, not because they do not want help, but because the process feels like a second crisis layered on top of the first. When the maze becomes too heavy, people look for the simplest survival option, a bed for tonight. But shelter is not one thing. Shelter has its own trade-offs, and those trade-offs shape where homelessness becomes visible. Shelter reality versus shelter theory. From the outside, a shelter bed looks like an obvious solution. From the inside, it can look like a gamble. Safety is one issue. Control is another. You cannot always protect your belongings or documents. You cannot always sleep deeply. If you work, the rules may not fit your shifts. If you are a couple, you may be separated. If you have a pet, you may be excluded. If you have trauma, the noise and crowding can be too much. The smaller detail that matters is storage. A person can handle a lot if they can keep their papers and work items safe. Many shelters do not make that easy, so people carry everything. Then theft becomes a risk. Losing one folder can mean losing the ability to prove anything for months. There is also the simple problem of rotating nights. Emergency overnight shelters can be one night at a time. That means you still spend the day solving tonight. You still live with a constant question, where do I go after this? So some people choose invisibility instead. They rotate places, they stay in motion, they accept unsafe corners because it feels like control. That choice looks irrational from a distance. Up close, it is risk management. When the outside becomes visible in public space, pressure rises fast, and the fastest response is rarely housing. It is order. Public order replaces housing policy. When a bench becomes a bed, it becomes a complaint. When a doorway becomes a sleeping spot, it becomes a problem area. Then the system reaches for tools that move problems quickly. Sometimes it is a request to move along. Sometimes it is a fine. Sometimes it is a rule about loitering, alcohol, or sleeping equipment. Often it comes through the local public order office, with the logic that public space must be kept usable. The language stays neutral. The impact is not. The impact is forced movement. Constant movement costs sleep and safety. It breaks routines that could connect people to help. It pushes homelessness out of visible places and into more dangerous edges. Underpasses, industrial corridors, forest lines, stations where nobody stays long. That creates a public illusion. A center looks cleaner, so people assume the crisis shrank. But the crisis often just relocated. That is where zombie city feelings spread, because the surface looks managed while the reality feels worse. Being pushed out of place also means being pushed into motion, and motion has its own costs. Transport punishes the least flexible. A delay is not equal for everyone. For a person with a stable home, a delay is lost time. For a person near homelessness, a delay can be a chain reaction. If you are living far from work because it was the only temporary spot you could find, you already have a long commute. If transport fails, you are late. If you are late, you get warnings. Warnings become fewer shifts. Then the rent trap tightens again. Transport also becomes shelter for some people. Warm, predictable, anonymous. Not a lifestyle, a workaround. It collapses the moment ticket checks become stricter, stations close at night, or policing increases. And delays do something else. They steal planning. When your day is already tight, a missed connection can mean missing an appointment, missing a benefit meeting, missing a doctor's slot you waited months for. That is how transport problems become paperwork problems, and paperwork problems become housing problems. This is why homelessness can be hard to count in an orderly place. People do not always sleep on a sidewalk. They sleep in motion or in spaces designed for transit, not rest. That makes help harder and denial easier. Then health slips, and health is not just pain. Health is appointments, paperwork, and performance, which means health becomes another gate. Healthcare exists, access doesn't. The system can look excellent on paper and still fail you in real time. The problem is often access. If you work unstable hours or move between temporary places, you cannot easily wait months for an appointment. You cannot easily manage referrals. You cannot easily sit in a waiting room for hours and still keep your job. So people delay care. Small problems become bigger problems. Bigger problems reduce work performance. Reduced performance reduces income. Reduced income tightens housing. The loop tightens. There is also the administrative side of health. Insurance letters, co-payment receipts, proof of coverage. If you are homeless, even keeping those papers becomes a task. And if you cannot prove what you already have, you can end up paying more, waiting longer, and falling further. This is one of the brutal truths. Homelessness is not only a housing condition. It breaks every other system at once. The society often responds as if it is one isolated issue, and that mismatch is where the crisis grows quietly. For some people, the gates are sharper because legal status depends on documents and deadlines. When homelessness overlaps that pressure, behavior changes fast. Integration as an obstacle course. Many official interactions start calmly. Bring documents, wait for the appointment, follow the steps. But behind that calm is a reality where delays carry risk. If your right to work or remain depends on deadlines, you cannot afford missing letters. If you cannot secure an address, you cannot complete certain steps. If steps stall, work becomes unstable. If work becomes unstable, housing becomes unstable again. In many cities, the foreigner's registration office is overloaded. People refresh appointment pages the same way they refresh housing listings. They carry folders the same way they carry shelter bags. And every delay can trigger another delay because the system is built like a relay race. One office will not move until the previous office stamped something. Each office can say it is following rules. Each letter can say it is standard. And yet the combined effect can be a machine that punishes instability with more instability. People respond by shrinking their lives. They avoid attention. They accept overcrowded rooms because at least it is an address. They accept exploitative arrangements because the paperwork depends on it. The pattern is not always visible, but the pressure is. Once you see that, you notice another layer. A whole economy grows around navigating these gates, and when navigating becomes a paid skill, the society quietly sorts people into can comply and cannot comply. The real product is compliance. Paying for a translation is paying for access. Paying for a notarization is paying for access. Paying a consultant to fill out a form is paying for access. None of these services are evil. The problem is that they become survival tools in a system built on perfect paperwork. Compliance is not evenly distributed. People with time comply. People with stability comply. People with language confidence comply. People with spare money outsource compliance. People without those things fall behind. Homelessness becomes a compliance collapse. You lose storage, so you lose papers. You lose papers, so you miss appointments. You miss appointments, so you lose benefits. You lose benefits, so you stay outside. Then being outside makes the next step harder again. This is why the public sometimes reads the crisis as people not following steps. They do not see steps multiplying as stability collapses. They do not see that the system rewards the very thing homelessness removes. And you can see the sorting in small details. Who can print? Who can scan? Who can take a weekday morning off? Who can wait in a line without losing a shift? These are capacity differences that get mistaken for character. So the surface stays calm, but more people quietly fail the stability test, and that produces a particular kind of fatigue in households and in cities. What this produces? It produces workers who look normal in the day and are homeless at night. It produces shelters that become holding patterns. It produces city centers that look managed while the crisis spreads to edges and corridors. It also produces anger in the wrong direction. People blame the visible homeless. People blame newcomers. People blame bad behavior. But much of the mechanism is administrative. Scarcity plus procedures plus time gates. It is the slow conversion of human problems into compliance problems. And once a crisis becomes a compliance story, the policy response narrows. More enforcement, more conditions, more proof, more appointments. That looks like seriousness, but it can deepen the trap if it does not create exits. The exit is boring, predictable living costs, so one bill does not knock you off balance. Faster processing, so help arrives before the fall becomes permanent, and enough housing supply to make the pipeline real instead of theoretical. It also requires admitting that functioning is not the same as secure, which brings us to the fork, because a society does not avoid choosing, it chooses through defaults. The road ahead. There are 3 paths. The first path is visibility management. Make central streets look cleaner, move people along, tighten rules, increase patrols. It produces immediate visual change and predictable human outcomes. More exhaustion, more hidden sleeping, more untreated illness, and longer time outside. The second path is warehousing. Tolerate homelessness in certain zones or temporary sites without a reliable pipeline into real housing. This reduces conflict in some areas, but creates permanent waiting rooms that harden into normality. The third path is stability first, not as a slogan, as a design. Safe places that do not punish sleep. Rapid housing access with minimal barriers. Prevention that arrives fast when a household is one bill from collapse, and enough building permission so exits exist. Watch what budgets reward. Enforcement gets renewed, housing approvals take meetings, and the gap gets filled by tents and sleep on trains. If any part of this felt familiar, that's not an accident. These gates exist in real buildings, real jobs, and real waiting rooms. Share in the comments which one hits fastest in your city, because that's how the pattern becomes visible. If this helped you understand the system instead of just blaming people, hit like so more viewers see it, and subscribe to stay with this series as we keep mapping how these rules quietly shape everyday life.